Hello, everybody. Yeah, this is kind of the fourth video I've made on the 1.0 update. Guess you're gonna have to deal with it, because man, oh man, is Development 16 a juicer. Just filled with information. So the first part here is about player agency, which essentially is how much control you have over your runs. Hopoo defines this on two levels: the micro level, which is literally just shooting enemies, dodging hits, jumping around, etc., etc. And then the macro level, which is more about the stuff that I talk about in my videos, such as time spent per stage, what items you're looking out for, when to do this versus that, etc. And basically, you're saying here that they've been a little lacking on the macro department, and it's a roguelite, but you always kind of feel like you're just along for the ride to some degree. As in, you're at the mercy of RNGs a little too much in your runs. So they're addressing this in two different ways. Number one, they are touching up a lot of items and introducing new ones in the hopes that more meaningful build decisions can be made, aside from just, choosing the command artifact. And number two, introducing new avenues to allow more agency on a macro level, with the star being the new scrapper interactable, which is a few sections down. We'll talk about the scrapper. For the new items, their focus was on making them have interesting synergies with both other items and the survivor. And every new item in this update is either going to be a lunar or boss item or an equipment. No white, green, or red items in this up. And the reason behind that is because they feel like those three categories strike the right balance between chase items and core items. Core items being like syringes, teddy bears, goat hooves, ukuleles, will-o'-the-wisp, ATG, etc. And the chase items being like the 57-leaf clover, the meat hooks, etc. And I really like this sensitivity. The boss drops for higher level bosses make some of the most difficult encounters the most exciting as well. I really like that approach. And here's a picture of a new equipment. Throw a curse doll that repeatedly triggers your on-kill effects. Now, who knows how long the duration is, how often it's going to be triggering your things. I have no idea. But that alone sounds very, very insane to have. Think about this. We toss it on an enemy and then 10 million will-o'-the-wisp stacks just blow up in their face instantly, and they do it 3 times over, and then everything's insta dead, something like that. That just sounds really fun to me. This is another huge change here: bleeds. Essentially what they're doing here is when you apply a bleed, all existing stacks of your bleed are refreshed in duration. Meaning, yes, infinite bleeds are now going to be possible. So if they're making bleeds essentially permanent now and they don't touch up the tri-tip, I would find that really odd. And just for a quick overview, bleeds do not scale from crits. They don't scale from proc chains because a damage over time does not have any proc coefficient associated with it. So it can't crit, can't proc anything else. It does benefit from damage boost. So, base damage increases, spinal tonic, shaped glass, and then focus crystals if you're in range, shattering justice if the debuff is applied, armor piercing rounds if it's a boss, etc. They do scale with attack speed. Obviously, the more faster you attack, the faster you apply bleeds. And finally, you do have to invest in maintaining a strong bleed. Here is another interesting section: the Chiaro and the Reynolds bands. They no longer will proc on hit, but rather are always guaranteed to proc on any attack that deals large damage. So there's going to be a threshold. Who knows what it is? Otherwise, anything past the second loop would be proccing your bands instantaneously if the damage didn't scale. And then they undergo an internal cooldown before they can proc again. When it says internal cooldown here, that kind of makes me think of the cooldown that's already associated with your charge abilities like Artificer's Attack, Rex's M2, etc., where there's that 0.5 second delay. No matter if you have brain stocks or something like that, there's always that 0.5 second delay, and that delay is not affected by Alien Head. So maybe this internal cooldown with the bands also is not affected by cooldown reduction. We'll have to see though. And the reasoning behind this change is that they want them to scale better with the hard-hitting stuff like Rebar Puncher, Frag Grenade, Nano Bomb, etc. Also, you can see here the fire band was changed a little bit. It's much larger AoE, but a little weaker. But honestly, it still looks like it's going to be a pretty good item. And then they go on to mention a few items that are directly getting buffs: the Monster Tooth, the Head Stomper, the Effigy of Grief, and the Interstellar Death Plant. Thank the Lord, that thing needs a buff. And obviously, they're not going to make these items become top tier suddenly, but the gap between them and others should be smaller. This is a really good change to me. I've always supported the notion of having bad items in a loot pool because that makes the good items actually good. So I don't want these things to become top tier, but they definitely need a little bit of love. And finally, they're saying here that some items that are usually underperforming are now doing a little better because there's a proper final boss to prepare for. And they use the example of guillotines, ukuleles, ceremonial daggers. Those things aren't really useful in the final boss, probably because it's just one singular target, and therefore other items will become a little more useful. Moving on here, the next session is the scrapper mechanic. So it's an interactable on a stage, and you can select any items of your choosing and convert them into scrap. And the scrap is prioritized when you use a 3D printer. Now, I was a little confused whether or not the scrap is going to be X amount of scrap. So a white item gives 1, a green gives 3, a red gives 5, or something like that. Or if it's going to be a white item gives white scrap, a green item gives green scrap, etc. So I asked Hopoo, and it turns out it is going to be tiered scrap. So a white item will give white scrap specifically, a green will give green, etc. And to summarize this section here, this is basically going off of the macro level of that player agency at the beginning, where I have these less than desirable items like, I don't know, monster teeth, med kits, war banners, etc. I can scrap them and then hang on to that scrap until I find a crit printer or a 3D printer, etc., and then toss it all in there. Now, yes, you're going to harm how impactful your run is early on. If you find a scrapper on stage 3 and choose to use all of your crappy items, turn them into scrap, you may be losing out on a lot more power than you may realize. But whatever you choose to do with the scrapper, I still love this edition because it adds more to that player agency. It lets me have more control over what I want to do with my run. Also, a little blurb here, 3D printers are going to be more common in general, and the Bazaar Between Time, the blue portal, is going to have 5 lunar items to choose from instead of 4. And then lastly here is the new game mode called Eclipse. And I can just picture exactly what Hopoo was thinking when he wrote this. But I obliterate on monitoring all the time, being the god gamer I am. So what can I use all these brand new options for? In comes Eclipse. So Eclipse itself is not going to be directly a new difficulty, but rather a new game mode entirely, like Prismatic Trials. And essentially, every time you beat the game, it's going to add a new modifier to your run up to a maximum of 8. And it's tracked separately per survivor. So I can be on Eclipse 5 on Commando and Eclipse 8 on Artificer or something like that. And they're making it clear here that Eclipse has no unlockables, achievements, or trophies. It is purely for the challenge. It's for challenge enthusiasts, like the one run challenge, the mail challenge, etc. I'm not expecting it to be super fleshed out, especially here they say it's an experimental weekend project, but hey, just something in the base game that allows me to push myself further and further. I love that idea. And without having played it, obviously the patch isn't out yet. One thing I know I would already like to see is, say, like after 3 successful Eclipse levels, you can choose to add 1 positive modifier to the run. You can see here the negative ones are your starting health is cut in half, the teleporter radius is cut in half. So maybe after the 3rd one, you get a negative effect, but then you can choose like, I don't know, 20% more damage or 10% more movement speed, or teleporter charges 10% faster, something like that. Just to feel like you're not going up against like unbearable odds or something like that. Anyway, guys, that's all the info in Development Thought 16. It was chock full of new stuff. So let me know in the comments below, what is your favorite change? What are you most excited for? Has this Development Thoughts piqued your interest even more in the update? Are you even more hyped? Because I know I am. You can check out my stream at twitch.tv/Woolie Gaming and consider joining our Discord server as well. Thanks for watching, everybody. I love you. The update is in 1 week.